The morning Gideon Holt sat down on a bench in Confederation Park and cried. He hadn't eaten since Tuesday. That part surprised people later when the story came out. They couldn't square it. The man worth $43 million, the one whose name was on the Holt Cairns community wing at the Ottawa General, sitting on a public bench in a December coat that cost more than most people's rent, crying into his hands over an empty stomach. But grief has a way of making even the simplest things impossible, and Gideon had been grieving for 7 weeks. He hadn't planned to be in the park. He'd meant to go to the office. His driver had pulled up to the building on Spark Street, and Gideon had sat in the back seat for 11 minutes without moving, before he quietly asked Malcolm to just drive. Malcolm had driven. He always did. He'd worked for the Holt family for 19 years, and he'd learned early that some mornings required driving and nothing else. They'd circled for a while, past the Rideau Centre, down along the canal where the ice was just beginning to form at the edges, gray and fragile. Eventually Gideon had said, "Here." Malcolm had pulled over, and Gideon had walked into the park alone. The bench was cold. He hadn't noticed. There was a thin layer of snow on the seat, and he'd sat right in it, which also went unnoticed. The temperature was -11 with the wind, and the park was mostly empty. A few dog walkers at the far end, a woman in a yellow parka walking fast with her head down, a vendor with a hot dog cart positioned hopefully near the main path despite the cold. Gideon had looked at none of them. He was looking at his phone, at a photograph. It was his daughter, Caroline. She was 8 years old in the picture, sitting in the backyard of the house in Rockcliffe Park, holding a sprinkler over her head and shrieking with the kind of full-body joy that children forget how to fake. She was 11 now. Or she would have been on the 14th of January. She had not made it to 11. She had made it to 10 years and 8 months and 22 days, and then a Tuesday in October had taken everything with it. Gideon wasn't sure how long he sat there. Long enough for his fingers to go numb inside his gloves. Long enough for the hot dog vendor to glance at him twice, with the particular expression Canadians reserve for strangers they're worried about, but aren't sure they should approach. Long enough for the dog walkers to come and go and come back again. He became aware of someone standing near him the way you become aware of something in your peripheral vision, slowly and then all at once. She was small, maybe 10, maybe 11, hard to say. She had that age's particular combination of thinness and self-possession. A child who had learned to take up only the space she needed. Her coat was dark green, wool, and it was a size too big. Someone had sewn a patch over the left elbow, a small maple leaf, careful stitching, the kind of repair that takes time. Her boots were clean but old, the tread worn smooth in the heel. She had a backpack over one shoulder and she was holding, with both hands and some care, a paper bag that had clearly been folded down from something larger. She was watching him with the direct, unblinking attention that children and animals give to things they find genuinely puzzling. Gideon noticed her and straightened slightly. He didn't wipe his face. There didn't seem to be any point. "Are you sick?" she asked, not unkindly, just direct, the way a certain kind of child asks things. "No," Gideon said. She considered this. "You're crying." "I know. My grandma cries sometimes," she said, "when her back hurts. But she says it's not because of the pain, it's because being in pain makes you tired." "Are you tired?" Gideon looked at her for a long moment. He had not had a real conversation with another human being in 6 days. His assistant fielded his calls. Malcolm drove him places. The cleaning woman came on Thursdays, and they nodded at each other in hallways. His sister had stopped trying to phone after he'd let 17 calls go to voicemail, though she still sent texts he read at 2 in the morning when the house got too quiet. "Yes," he said, "I suppose I am." The girl nodded, satisfied with this answer. She looked at the paper bag in her hands, then back at him, and something moved across her face, a quick calculation, private and serious. "I have a sandwich," she said. "My grandma made it this morning. She puts butter on it because she says it keeps the bread from going soggy. It's cheddar." She paused. "I haven't eaten it yet." Gideon looked at the bag. "That's your lunch." "Yes, then you should eat it." "I'm not hungry yet," she said, which was so obviously not true. It was 12:30 in the afternoon, and she was a growing child in -11, that it broke something loose in his chest without warning. He felt it go. He pressed his lips together hard. "Sit down if you like," he said, because it was the only thing he could think of. She sat. She put the bag between them on the bench. "I'm Penny," she said. Gideon. That's an old name. My father liked old things. He'd liked Victorian furniture and Celtic fiddle music and the word steadfast, and had died at 64 of a heart attack that everyone who knew him described as deeply unfair. Gideon had been 31. He'd thought at the time that losing a parent was the worst grief a person could carry. He had not yet known about the other kind. My grandma's name is Harriet, Penny said. She says it's old-fashioned, but she doesn't mind because it suits her. She says some people are named too young, and they have to grow into their names, and some people are named exactly right. She sounds like she thinks about things. She thinks about everything, Penny said, with a mixture of love and mild exasperation that was so familiar it hit him like a physical blow. That was Caroline's voice. That exact tone, that precision. Gideon had heard it 1,000 times directed at him and would not hear it again. He looked away, at the canal, at the gray ice, the bare trees. Did someone die? Penny asked. He turned back to her. She wasn't being cruel. She asked the way a child asks when she has already learned that death is a real thing, not a concept. My daughter, he said. He had not said those words to another person in 5 weeks. His lawyer knew, his assistant, his sister, but he had not said them himself out loud to anyone because saying them made it a different kind of true. Penny was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'm sorry, that's really sad, yes. How old was she? She would have been 11 in January. Penny absorbed this. I'm 10, she said, as if establishing something important. I'll be 11 in March. Then you're almost the same age. What was her name? Caroline. That's a pretty name. She said it without flourish, just as a fact. Did she like things? The question startled him. What? Did she have things she liked? Like a specific thing, not just regular things. Gideon's throat tightened. She liked those little birds, chickadees. She used to put sunflower seeds on the windowsill every morning in winter and wait for them. She had names for all of them. He stopped. She liked mathematics. She was good at it, better than me. She liked the smell of libraries. She used to make these terrible jokes that weren't funny at all, and then laugh so hard at her own jokes that eventually you had to laugh too, just because of her. Penny smiled. My grandma does that. Tells jokes that aren't funny and then laughs too much. She tilted her head. Your daughter sounds like she was nice. She was the best person I knew, Gideon said. He hadn't meant to say that much. Penny looked at the paper bag between them. Then she picked it up and held it out to him. You should eat something, she said. My grandma always says things feel bigger when you're hungry. He stared at the bag. That's your lunch, I know, but you look like you need it more. She said it matter-of-factly, the way her grandmother probably said things. I can get something from the cart. She gestured toward the hot dog vendor, who was now engaged in blowing on his hands. The cart's expensive. She gave a small shrug that said she'd already calculated this and made her peace with it, which was somehow more gutting than any protest would have been. I can't take your lunch, Gideon said. You're not taking it. I'm giving it. She pushed the bag slightly toward him. There's a difference. He took the bag. He didn't know why. He unfolded the top, and inside was a sandwich, wrapped neatly in wax paper, and a small mandarin orange, and a note in old-fashioned cursive that said, Eat up. Penny love. Cold days need warm stomachs. Gran. He read the note twice. Your grandmother wrote you a note, he said. She does every day. Penny said it the way you say something you've never had to think about, because it's always been true. He sat with that for a moment. Then he folded the bag closed and set it on his knee and looked at this small, thin girl in the oversized coat who had just given him the only food she had and thought, for the first time in 7 weeks, about something other than the weight inside his own chest. Where do you live? He asked. Lowertown, on St. Patrick Street, near the market. She paused. We moved there in September. Before that we were in Vanier, you and your grandmother, since I was 4. My mom lives in Kelowna now. She sends cards. She said this without bitterness and without particular warmth, just as geography. The way you say someone lives in Kelowna. My grandma works at the laundromat on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and she cleans offices on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She's really tired, but she doesn't say so. Gideon thought about the maple leaf patch on the coat elbow, the careful stitching. Do you go to school near the park, Laurier? I was coming back from. She hesitated. I go to the library sometimes at lunch. They have a reading program, and if you finish certain books you get a certificate, and the librarian, Mr. Dowd, he's really nice. He puts the certificates up on the wall. She squared her shoulders slightly. I have 4. 4 certificates. Almost 5. I'm almost done the 5th book. He looked at her properly, maybe for the first time since she'd sat down. She had her grandmother's resourcefulness in her face. He could see it, the way some children wear the best of the adults who raised them. She had also, very clearly, her own self. Distinct, undiminished by circumstance. What book? He said. It's called The Stone Angel. It's a Canadian one. Mr. Dowd says it's not usually for people my age, but he said I could try it, and if it was too hard I could switch. But it's not too hard. She thought about it. It's sad, though. It's about a woman who can't figure out how to love people right, and by the time she understands, it's almost too late. She looked at him sideways. Have you read it? A long time ago. Did you like it? I think I was too young to understand it properly, Gideon said. He was 47 years old, and sitting on this bench in Confederation Park in December, he thought he might understand it now in a way he couldn't have a year ago, when Caroline was alive and the world made sense. He sat with that in silence. Penny seemed comfortable with silence, which was its own kind of grace. After a while she said, I should go back. Lunch is almost over. Of course. He stood as she stood, which he seemed to find mildly amusing, the formality of it. Take the orange too, she said, nodding at the bag in his hands. You can't just eat a sandwich. That's not a real lunch. I haven't eaten the sandwich yet either. Take both. She shouldered her backpack. My grandma puts an orange in every day, and I don't always finish it. He looked down at the bag. He looked at her. Penny, he said, what's your grandmother's last name? She looked up at him, assessing. Calloway, she said. Harriet Calloway. Why? I'd like to thank her, he said, for the sandwich. Penny gave him a long, measuring look. The look of a child who has learned to be careful with strangers who ask too many questions, and to know the difference between careful and rude. She seemed to arrive at some decision. She works at Pine and Wellington Laundry, she said, on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. She's usually done by 4. Thank you. Don't be weird about it, Penny said, very seriously, and walked away across the park with her backpack bouncing and her boots crunching on the thin snow, and Gideon stood there with a paper bag in his hands and watched her go. He ate the sandwich on the bench. The orange, too. Then he sat for another 20 minutes, looking at the canal, and something shifted in him. Not healed, not even close to healed, but shifted, the way a stone shifts in water when the current changes. He was still in grief. He would be in grief for a long time, but something small and warm had found a crack in it. He called Malcolm. Malcolm came without comment, which was the right thing to do. That evening, Gideon went to his daughter's room for the first time since October. He stood in the doorway for a long time. Then he walked in. He sat on the edge of her bed, on the windowsill with the small dishes she'd used for sunflower seeds, empty now, a fine layer of dust on the ceramic. He looked at them for a while. Then he went to his coat, which was still in the front hall, and found the note at the bottom of the paper bag. Eat up, Penny love. Cold days need warm stomachs. Gran. He folded it carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. He wasn't sure why. It just seemed important not to throw it away. He called his sister that night. She answered on the first ring. She didn't say I knew you'd call eventually. Didn't say I told you so. Didn't say anything except his name. And then they talked for 2 hours about Caroline and about their father and about the particular Quebec winter. The year their mother taught them both to skate, and it was the first night in 7 weeks that Gideon fell asleep before 3 in the morning. Harriet Calloway was a practical woman who did not believe in fuss. She was 63 years old, 5'2", and had hands that showed every year she'd work them, which was a lot of years and a lot of work. She'd come to Ottawa from Cape Breton when she was 27 with her husband, Douglas, who had been a gentle, funny man with a weakness for terrible puns and a talent for fixing engines. And they'd made a life here, a real one, until Douglas's heart had given out at 59, and the life had had to be remade into a different shape. She did not complain about this. It was not in her nature to complain. She did sometimes, in the quiet of the apartment at night, sit at the kitchen table with a cup of red rose tea and allow herself to feel how tired she was. Not for long, just for a few minutes. Then she rinsed the cup and went to bed. Penny was the best thing she had left of Douglas. Or rather, Penny had Douglas's best things in her. The stubbornness, the curiosity, the specific tenderness for people in trouble that Douglas had called noticing, and that Harriet had always thought was his finest quality. Penny noticed. She had noticed, apparently, a man crying alone in the park and had given him her lunch and had come home with an air of casual satisfaction about it that made Harriet both proud and unsurprised. "You gave him your sandwich," Harriet said that evening, not as a question. "He needed it more than me," Penny said, already pulling out her homework. "That was a good sandwich. I know. That's why I gave it to him." Harriet put another piece of bread in the toaster. "His name? Gideon. He seemed nice. He asked about you." Harriet looked at her. "About me. He wanted to know your name. I told him you work at the laundromat." Penny glanced up. "I hope that's okay." He seemed like he just wanted to say thank you, not like anything weird. Harriet thought about this. She had raised Penny with a careful instinct for the difference between people who meant harm and people who meant well but were lost. She trusted Penny's instincts, which were good, because she had worked to make them good. "We'll see," she said. He came on a Wednesday. Harriet was finishing a load of commercial linens when she heard the door and looked up. And there was a man in his late 40s in a good coat, standing just inside the door with the look of someone who was aware he was out of place and was trying not to make a thing of it. He was not what she'd expected, though she hadn't expected anything specific. She'd half wondered if Penny had imagined some of it, the way children embellish without meaning to. But he looked exactly like what Penny had described, a man who had been through something. "Mrs. Calloway," he said. "Just Harriet." She wiped her hands. "You're Gideon." Yes, he seemed relieved she already knew who he was. "I wanted to return this." He held out a paper bag folded down, clearly new, and to say thank you for the sandwich. "And the orange. Penny said you hadn't eaten." "I hadn't, no." Harriet looked at him steadily. She had worked with the public in various capacities for 35 years, and she had learned to read people the way some people read weather. Not perfectly, not always, but often enough. What she read in Gideon Holt was not danger. It was the particular blankness of a person who has had the meaning knocked out of them and is still trying to figure out how to put it back. "Sit down," she said, nodding at the plastic chair near the folding table. "I've got 10 minutes before the dryers need attention." He sat. She sat across from him. "Penny said you lost your daughter," she said, because she was a practical woman, and dancing around things seemed unkind. "In October." He looked at his hands. "She was 10. She was." He stopped. Tried again. "She was remarkable. I imagine she was." Harriet folded her hands on the table. "I'm sorry, there's nothing worse of. No, my husband died 6 years ago. That was hard. This," she shook her head, "children shouldn't go first. It's wrong in some way that's hard to put into words." "Yes, exactly that." He looked up, and there was something in his face that suggested he had been wanting someone to say exactly that for weeks. "Exactly." They sat with that for a moment. The dryers turned. A woman came in with a cart of laundry, and Harriet raised a hand in greeting without taking her eyes from Gideon. "Penny talks about you," he said. "She talks about the way you think about things. The notes. The orange." He paused. "My daughter used to put sunflower seeds on the windowsill for chickadees. She named them all." Harriet smiled, and it was the kind of smile that cost something, warm and real and a little painful. "Children like that," she said. "The naming of things makes the world feel more knowable. Does Penny do that? She names the squirrels in the backyard. There are 4 of them: Margaret, Sir Biscuit, Trouble, and Dave." Gideon laughed. It surprised both of them. A real laugh, short, startled out of him. "Dave?" She said he looked like a Dave. She maintains it was obvious. Harriet's smile deepened. "You have to admire the certainty. You do." She looked at him for another moment. Then she said carefully, "What is it you need, Gideon? And I don't mean the sandwich." He was quiet for a long time, long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "I don't know how to go back, to the world, to things mattering." He looked at the dryers. I have a business. I have responsibilities. I have a foundation in my daughter's name that I set up last month because I didn't know what else to do. And none of it makes the mornings easier." Harriet nodded. "No, it wouldn't." "I sat on that bench for 3 hours," he said. "I didn't eat. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there." He paused. "And then a small child in a too big coat sat down and gave me her lunch and asked me questions like I was a normal person." "Penny treats everyone like a normal person," Harriet said. "It's one of her best qualities and occasionally her most inconvenient one." "It helped," Gideon said simply. "I don't know why exactly. It just shifted something." He looked at her. "I wanted you to know that. That what you've given her, the way she moves through the world, it mattered to someone. Harriet looked at him for a long moment. She had not, in 6 years of doing this alone, had someone say anything like that to her. She had not realized until just now that she'd needed to hear it. "She's a good girl," she said quietly. "She's remarkable," he said. "Like I said." The dryer buzzed. Harriet stood, because she was a practical woman, and the linens wouldn't fold themselves, but she stood more slowly than usual, with a feeling she hadn't quite expected. It wasn't a simple thing what followed. Life rarely is. Gideon came back on the Friday. He brought coffee and asked if Harriet needed help with the commercial folding, and she said yes without hesitation because she did need help. And pride was something she'd learned to spend carefully. They talked while they folded sheets, about Cape Breton, about Ottawa in winter, about the particular loneliness of laundromats, and why people found them comforting anyway. He told her about Caroline's foundation, the Holt Caroline Reading Initiative, which he was trying to build into something that would put books in community spaces across Ottawa, real books, ones that children could keep. He said it like he wasn't sure it was enough. She said it like it was. "It's a good thing. Keep doing it." He met Penny properly that Friday afternoon when she came in after school. She looked at him with the same measuring look she'd given him in the park, and he looked back steadily, and after a moment she said, "You ate the sandwich." "I did, and the orange, and the orange." She nodded, satisfied, and sat at the folding table and started on her homework. After a while she looked up and said, "My grandma said your daughter liked chickadees." She did. "We have some at the park near our school. There's one that's really bold. He'll almost eat out of your hand." She looked back at her notebook. "I call him Jeffrey." With a G, Gideon looked across the folding table at this small, determined child, and then at Harriet, who was watching him with the quiet, careful expression of someone who had learned not to hope for things too quickly and was trying not to. "That's a good name," he said. "Very dignified, that's what I thought," Penny said, already back in her notebook. "It took weeks, then months. It was not a smooth thing or a neat thing, and Gideon would have said, if anyone had asked, that he wasn't trying to replace what he had lost. You don't replace something like that. It sits in you permanently. It just gradually stops being the only thing. What he was doing was something more like learning, again, that the world contained people like Harriet and Penny Calloway. That was not nothing. In fact, it turned out to be quite a lot. The Caroline Holt Reading Initiative opened its first community library location in the Lowertown Community Center in February, 3 blocks from St. Patrick's Street. Penny was there for the opening. She stood in front of the shelves with the kind of reverence usually reserved for cathedrals, and then turned to Gideon and said, "You should put the stone angel in here." "I will," he said. "And you should have a section for the certificates," she said, "like Mr. Dowd does, so people know that reading something hard matters." He looked at her for a long moment. "Yes," he said, "we'll do exactly that." That evening, driving back across the city, Gideon looked out the window at Ottawa in February, the canal frozen solid now, people skating, the light low and golden on the snow, and thought about his daughter, who had loved winter and loved libraries, and loved the particular satisfaction of having named all 4 chickadees correctly. He thought about her every day. He would think about her every day for the rest of his life. That would not change, but he had learned from a 10-year-old girl in a too big coat who had given him her lunch without being asked and without expecting anything back, that grief and grace are not opposites, that sometimes the smallest act of noticing, just sitting down, just handing something over, just asking, "Are you tired?" is the thing that keeps someone in the world. Harriet had put it best, one Wednesday in January between 2 loads of linens, the way she put most things. People don't need saving, Gideon. They mostly just need someone to sit down. He had been sitting on a bench, not expecting anything, and a child had sat beside him. And that, it turned out, had been exactly enough.